Hello, my name is Beth Mulcahy, and I am the managing partner and senior attorney of the Mulcahy Law Firm in Phoenix, Arizona. I've enjoyed practicing community association law for the past 23 years, and our law firm currently represents over 1,000 planned communities and condominium associations throughout the state of Arizona. I've also served on my HOA board for many years. Welcome to our one-of-a-kind virtual HOA Academy in partnership with the neighborhood services from all over Arizona. Our goal is to help you and answer your questions regarding HOAs and condos during this uncertain time, because together we are better. For nearly 2 decades, our firm has been partnering with cities around Arizona to provide free education and resources to board members, community managers, and homeowners regarding community association law. We understand that a lot of you are missing the informative and lively in-person classes that have been previously offered by neighborhood services. We are missing seeing you too, answering your questions, and learning from you. We understand that now, more so than ever, it is important that board members and community managers have the tools needed to move forward as we adjust to our new normal, and so that we are able to confront today's challenges. And we want to make it as easy as possible for you to still have access to community association education from the comfort of your own home. Thank you to everyone who has made this series possible, especially representatives from the neighborhood services around the valley who have been working together with my team to provide a virtual HOA Academy with cutting-edge virtual classes. We are in this together. We know that this is an uncertain time and that our community members and residents are hurting right now. 10 weeks ago started an unprecedented global pandemic, and our nation is facing record unemployment numbers. We've seen the best come out in Arizona during this time. Arizonans and community members have united to show support for our essential workers and each other. Residents have listened to recommendations of government officials and stayed home to slow the spread of the disease.
This is Bruce Wall from the City of Scottsdale's Neighborhood College Program. We're all in this together.
The City of Peoria, we're in this together.
The City of Chandler, we're in this together.
Town of Queen Creek, we're in this together.
Hi, this is Jamie from the City of Scottsdale with my daughter Jocelyn. Whether you're working from home or doing kindergarten from home, we want to remind you that we're in this together.
City of Tempe, we are in this together.
We are better together. If you have attended an in-person seminar of mine in the past, you know I encourage you to ask questions throughout the seminar and to speak up if you have something to say. While this year's educational classes may look different, I encourage you still to interact with me by commenting on this video when I ask a question. Or if you have a question, make sure to ask it and we'll respond in the comments section. We will make every effort to respond to every comment that's posted before the close of business today. Let's begin with our seminar for today. First, I have a couple questions for you. I always like to know who's in my audience. So if you wouldn't mind commenting in the comment section and let me know, first, are you a board member? Are you a manager? Are you an owner who's not also a board member? Where are you watching this video from today? Today we will be discussing several new cheat sheets that our firm has recently put out in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. These cheat sheets are pinned in the comments section, and so make sure that you check them out because we will be somewhat closely following these cheat sheets during the presentation today. 2 cheat sheets we'll be discussing today are tips for conducting a virtual board meeting and associations and COVID-19, a plan for reopening of HOA and condo common areas. Let's start with our first subject, tips for running a virtual board meeting. Since the pandemic started about 10 weeks ago, we've been confronted with a totally new normal in Arizona. we are no longer meeting in person for our board meetings and our annual meetings. And most, if not all, of our clients have now switched to having meetings via a virtual meeting. And so what are some tips that we've learned over the past 10 weeks as we've been thrown into this new normal of virtual board meetings? We're going to be talking about some different tips that we've learned from conducting these different virtual meetings. And we're also going to show you a way to comply with Arizona law and conduct these virtual meetings. Well, first, let's start out with just a reminder that Arizona planned communities and condominiums are still obligated to comply with the Arizona open meeting law, even during these unprecedented pandemic times. So how can boards balance this unique situation of not being able to meet in person, but still being required to follow the law and get business done in a timely manner? Despite the loosening of some restrictions by the state of Arizona, Mulcahy Law Firm still recommends that associations at this time continue conducting regular and annual meetings in a virtual meeting format, because it's very difficult to do social distancing during a regular and annual meeting. So let's talk about what options are available to association board members if they need to have a board meeting or an annual meeting. There's really two options that we're seeing most associations using for virtual board meetings or annual meetings. The first option is teleconferencing. Teleconferencing is the use of a telecommunication device like a computer, a laptop, a tablet, or a smartphone to hold online discussions between participants in different locations. If you use teleconferencing, you can choose whether or not your picture is displayed during the teleconference, and all participants can hear each other discuss items. In contrast, a conference call is a telephone call in which several people are able to talk with each other and hear each other at the same time using a shared line. Over the past 10 weeks, we've seen most of our boards transform into using teleconferencing for their virtual or their annual board meetings. A few who are more concerned about the technology and feel that there might be difficulty learning teleconferencing, they have been using the conference calls, which is fine as well. But teleconferencing, in my opinion, gives us a unique opportunity to make it almost feel like we actually are in person at a board meeting or at an annual meeting, because the participants can see and hear each other at the same time during the meeting. First, let's talk about some requirements that you have to follow even though you're having a virtual teleconference meeting or conference call meeting of your board. Remember that under Arizona law, board members must provide notice to the unit owners or the lot owners of meetings of the board at least 48 hours in advance of the meeting. And this can be done by newsletter, conspicuous posting, or any other reasonable means as determined by the board of directors. Many of our clients are sending out notice of board meetings via emails to the membership, or posting it on their website, or maybe even posting a physical copy of a notice at a place in the association's common areas, like a bulletin board or outside, an area that is frequently visited by owners, such as a mailbox. The notice must include the date, time, and a comment that due to the COVID-19 pandemic, there will not be a physical Arizona location or an in-person meeting for whatever meeting you are scheduling, in addition to satisfying the standard notice requirements for a board meeting. It's also recommended that the notice clearly explain how the meeting will be held. If it's going to be strictly via teleconferencing, provide instructions on options on how to attend via video conferencing. Or if it's a conference call, make sure that you give them the telephone number and the password that they need to dial in when it's time for the meeting to start. The most important thing on the notice is to make sure that there's ease of use for your owners, so that if they do want to appear telephonically or they do want to teleconference into a board meeting, that they're able to do it with the information that is provided in the notice. Owners and members should also be given the option to attend via computer, laptop, tablet, or smartphone. While I understand that it may be possible that certain owners are not willing or maybe don't have the technological expertise to attend via teleconference or conference call, It still remains my opinion that these options are the best way to conduct board meetings right now or annual meetings during the pandemic. If an owner or members object to having a teleconference or conference call, I recommend providing meeting minutes, even if they're in their draft form and clearly marked as such, to the owners immediately after the meeting that aren't able to attend the teleconference or the conference call, board meeting, or annual meeting. Also, Zoom teleconferencing has an ability to tape their Zoom teleconferencing calls, and the tape of that is available about 45 minutes after the Zoom meeting ends. And that tape can be sent in a link form by email to all your owners as well. And typically the link form would be, much easier for some homeowners because all they'd have to do is click and listen. I remember though, if you are taping your Zoom board meetings, please be careful to, make sure that your board has a policy regarding how long you're going to be keeping the tapes of the Zoom board meetings or annual meeting. Zoom has a policy that you have to make a decision within 30 days if you are going to save it into their cloud permanently, or if you're going to make a copy of it and place it on the association's records. You just don't want to miss that window of opportunity, because once that 30 days expires, the tape of the meeting will be, destroyed by Zoom. Also, if your board decides to keep the Zoom tape of the meeting, you may want to determine if your board wants to have a policy regarding those, the video conference tape of the meeting. Some boards only keep a video tape of the meeting, until the meeting minutes are, created, and then they destroy it. Other boards keep it forever. Just recognize that if an owner requests to see that record, it is considered a book and record that you would have to provide to owners if they requested to see it. Now, of course, that would only be for the open board meeting. It would not be for the executive session. That, is something that only the board members would be able to see. Another important part of conducting a teleconference or conference call board meeting is making sure that you're providing an agenda to all the owners who are attending the meeting. Arizona law was changed several years ago, and if an owner was attending a meeting, the association had a requirement to provide a copy of the agenda so that the owners could follow along during the meeting. The pandemic and having meetings by video conferencing and conference call has taken away our ability to personally hand a copy of an agenda to owners who are attending the meeting. And so there are a couple of different ways that you can still comply with the law and make sure that the owners receive a copy of the agenda before the meeting. One way would be when you post the notice of the meeting to also post the proposed agenda for the board meeting or for the annual meeting. And so you could post it at the same time that you post the notice. Another way, you could post it on your website. You could email it to your owners in advance of the meeting. Those are also viable ways to provide a copy of the agenda. Or Zoom technology allows you to share a document with the attendees of a Zoom teleconference call. And that's another thing that the administrator who's handling the scheduling and the organizing of the Zoom call, they could share that as part of the program as the meeting is going forward when you're actually having the meeting. So you could do one of those ways, or you could do all of them to make sure that your owners have a copy of the agenda and to make sure that we're complying with Arizona law on this particular topic. One other recommendation we have when conducting a meeting by Zoom or by conducting it by conference call is to consider using a consent agenda. Now, a consent agenda is something that is used to allow the board to vote on and approve items that don't need discussion all at once. And so, because the nature of the Zoom call or the conference call is kind of unique and new, some boards are opting to try to shorten the meetings. And one way to do that would be to take routine things that do not require a lot of board discussion and place them on a consent agenda, and then have the board vote all at once, yes or no, to approve the consent agenda. And then those items are quickly approved typically at the beginning of the meeting. Now, one, kind of war story that I can tell you about from, doing a lot of Zoom teleconferences over the past few months is that we've noticed that the board meetings and the annual meetings, and I attended a removal meeting earlier this week. All of these meetings are becoming significantly shorter than they would be if they were in person. So definitely a silver lining of the pandemic has been that boards are really forced to being super organized going into these Zoom conference meetings, teleconference meetings, and to conference calls for board meetings or annual meetings or removal meetings. And by organizing so efficiently, it makes the meetings significantly shorter. And, I think from everybody's perspective, that's a good thing because, in my experience, board meetings sometimes tend to be too long, and that sometimes causes burnout of directors. So a silver lining is that we think these meetings are significantly shorter because of so much preparation that's needed to, be prepared to go on to a Zoom call or a conference call. Another kind of sticky wicket of, the pandemic and, conducting our business by Zoom or by a conference call is how do we allow members to participate during the teleconference or during the conference call? And remember that under Arizona law, any member or a designated representative of a member who's been designated in writing by the member, to be their representative, if they want to attend and speak at a board meeting, they have the right to do that at certain times, but definitely by law before the board takes any formal action on a matter. And so kind of a sticky wicket of the Zoom teleconferencing or conference calls is how do we keep control of the meeting when we have all these different people on the screen? And, maybe there are some members who want to contribute during the teleconferencing or during the conference call. How do we manage that? So I can give you some tips on that right now. If you're using the Zoom teleconferencing, the administrator, whoever's acting as the administrator for the meeting, typically it's the manager, maybe your attorney, or maybe even a board member. They have the ability to mute or unmute people during the meeting. And typically what we're finding is that during the meeting itself, the board members are unmuted, meaning that they can talk and everybody can hear them. But the homeowners are typically muted so that they're not able to interrupt the board business. And so if a homeowner wants to talk on a Zoom teleconference, there's a feature that allows them to raise their hand. It's a button that they push, and then the moderator can call on that homeowner either at that time or call on them at a different time in the meeting. Also, the homeowners can send messages to the moderator during the meeting. And so these are all effective ways, even though we're not face-to-face, eye-to-eye, so to speak, in person, that the moderator of the meeting can hear what the homeowners are asking and can provide them an opportunity to talk during the meeting. A question that I've been getting a lot from board members is, should we still have our homeowner forum at the beginning of our teleconference call or our conference call, virtual meeting? And the answer is, I think, yes, you should continue to do that. At the beginning of the meeting, you may want to establish what the protocols are for the meeting. And, a suggestion would be maybe allocate 10 minutes. And if any owner wants to make a comment, ask them to raise their hand if you're using Zoom teleconferencing, and maybe give them a minute or two to state whatever specifically that they would like to state. Another way that you can handle this would be to ask for homeowner comments in advance of the board meeting or the annual meeting, and then a designated person could read all of those comments. And you could ask for the owners to submit them by email or, maybe send a letter to the association. And that also would be a way for the homeowners' comments to be heard. Let's talk briefly about closed or executive sessions. Just a quick summary. Remember that under Arizona law, the board can close a board meeting and go into what we call executive session. And remember that there are recent changes to Arizona law that require the board to indicate on the agenda for the board meeting, and also, at some point when the regular board meeting closes, to verbally state the reasons why they're going into executive session. And I think the reason why our legislature did this was so that homeowners would fully understand why the board was going into a separate session and why they weren't invited to attend the executive session. Because by law, the executive session is, just the board, and they're only able to discuss 5 different topics during executive session. So just don't forget when you're having your virtual board meetings and you're either doing a teleconference or you're having a conference call, don't forget that the agenda for your regular board meeting should have a statement on it indicating, what section of the executive meetings law, the open meeting law, you will be discussing during executive session. And then also we encourage you to verbally also mention at the end of the regular board meeting what section in the open meeting law under the executive session section that you're going into executive session to discuss. And just as a friendly reminder, the 5 topics that you can go into executive session to discuss as a board would be legal advice from your attorney, which is number 1. 2, pending or contemplated litigation. So if you're thinking about suing an owner, or an owner is thinking about suing the association, or there's actual litigation between an owner and the association, or the association and any third party, that can be discussed during the executive session. The third area we can go into executive session for is personal health or financial information. Anytime we're discussing those about an independent contractor or an employee of the association, that's an executive session topic. 4 would be anytime the board is discussing the job performance of, compensation of, health records of, or specific complaints against an employee of the association or an independent contractor of the association. And then last but not least, the board also can discuss a member's appeal of any violation or any fines or penalties that have been levied against an owner. Now, there's an exception to that. If the owner wants that to be discussed during the open session, the board is required to move it to the open session. So just a real quick recap. If you're going into executive session, the most common subjects that we see boards go into executive sessions for would be legal advice from your attorney to your board or your association. If you're involved in any litigation, violations, delinquencies, if you're having difficulties with a contractor or an employee of your association, or you're talking about their compensation, those are the most common subjects that we see, you going into executive session for. Okay, so let's talk about some tips. If you're having an executive session, in a virtual format where you're going to be using Zoom, or you're going to be having a conference call, what are some tips that we can give you? Well, first, we already talked about this. Make sure that your agenda states the sections that you're going to be discussing from the open meeting law, the executive session topics. Make sure your agenda discusses that. Again, make sure that you announce at the beginning or at the end of the regular board meeting, that you're going into executive session and which topics you're going to be discussing. But then last but not least, how do we handle the logistics of getting owners off the call who shouldn't be either on the conference call or who shouldn't be on the Zoom call, so it's just the board listening in? And at first I thought this was really going to be kind of an issue, but after I had, like 20 or 30 Zoom meetings under my belt, I realized that this is not an issue because the administrator can keep track of who is on the call and who, is currently listening in. And it's very easy, none of us have more than, 10 board members, let's say. Most of us have somewhere between 3 and 7 board members. And so all those names are on the screen as to who's on the call. And then anytime anybody would be added or deleted from the call, the administrator and everybody else who's on the Zoom call would see. So some boards, how they're handling this is at the end of the open session, they're asking the non-board members to leave the call. And, there's no issue on it. People get off the call and they understand. Another option, and of course, if somebody refuses to leave, then the moderator can, remove them from the call. Another option would be to set up a second Zoom. So the first Zoom ends, and then set up a second Zoom call for the executive session, and that would have a separate password so that only the board members would know it, and only them would be able to get into the executive session. But like I said, we haven't really seen any issues with that, which is great. People understand that the executive session is just the board, and there haven't been any issues. Okay, a couple friendly reminders. Remember that boards are required to take meeting minutes, even if they're doing a Zoom call and the Zoom call is being taped as part of the Zoom program. The board meeting minutes are the official record of the association's meeting. So the board still does need to take meeting minutes. Again, if you have any people that are not willing to, who want to come to the board meeting, but they're unwilling for whatever reason to join as a Zoom conference call or to just join as a conference call via phone, you could provide those people the meeting minutes, even if they're in draft form, right away so that they know what happened at the meeting. We suggest that, but normally most boards, what they do is they wait to approve the meeting minutes at the next board meeting. So for example, if we have a meeting, on June 2nd, June 3rd, the next time that you would be meeting as a board typically will be in July. And so the first agenda, hopefully on your consent agenda, would be to approve last month's meeting minutes, and then they would become finalized once the board votes to approve them. So just keep in mind that you still do have to take meeting minutes, even if there is a tape by Zoom or a tape on your conference call system of the meeting. Just some parting thoughts on the changes that we've been handling as part of this pandemic. I just want to reassure you that our firm, Mulcahy Law Firm, we are here to help Arizona HOAs and condominiums conduct these board meetings virtually. And, we're here to help you in any way that you need help. Some associations have reached out to us and asked us to set up the Zoom calls, to organize, troubleshoot attendees' connection issues on the night of the meeting, assist with running their first Zoom teleconference because it's new technology that they haven't used before. I just had a call yesterday where a large master plan community asked me for tips so that they could have a successful annual meeting because they were going to have so many people attending. So I just want to reassure you that we're here, and there are many ways to contact our firm. We have our first Friday free call-in this Friday. And for those associations that have questions, but they maybe don't have the budget to have an attorney help them, that's a great resource for you. And if you contact our office between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. this Friday, it's always the first Friday of the month, we will add you to our callback list, and an attorney from our firm will return your call before the end of the day. We do get a lot of calls, so we try to get them all returned by lunch, but sometimes it extends into the afternoon. So that's a great resource if you need help or you have any additional questions on virtual board meetings. Also, many associations are now asking our firm to be available during their Zoom meetings. Typically, most of our boards meet in the evenings in case you need to have a question answered or in case you need to have an attorney dial in for a portion of the meeting to answer questions. And I think another silver lining of the pandemic is that this is a really inexpensive way for your association to get legal advice. Because pre-pandemic, of course, it was expensive to have an attorney attend your board meetings because the attorneys charge for travel time to and from your association in addition to the time that they're at the meeting. But now if boards are strategic, they can have, an attorney call into a meeting between 7 o'clock and 7:15 and have all their questions answered in that 15-minute window for a greatly reduced price. So, another silver lining, like I said, of the pandemic is that, you may have more access to attorneys at a cheaper cost to your association because the time that you spend with them will be the only thing that you're charged for. So another great resource for associations as they, try to navigate these different times, with the pandemic. We're entering a new phase in Arizona right now with the pandemic and, give you some tips on how you can reopen your common areas now that the stay-home order is expired and the governor has given us guidance on reopening pools and gyms in Arizona. So let's just kind of start out with where we are with the government orders that have, been given to Arizona associations and other businesses and residents of Arizona. Well, first, on May 16th, Governor Doug Ducey's Stay Healthy, Return Smarter, Return Stronger order went into effect. And when it went into effect, a lot of associations, wanted advice about what specifically does this mean for associations. So, basically the Stay Healthy, Return Smarter, Return Stronger order still calls for physical distancing, but it also encourages social connectedness. And it does allow for businesses to gradually and safely reopen in compliance with federal guidelines. However, all vulnerable individuals, so at-risk individuals, which include the elderly and individuals with underlying health conditions, should continue to limit their time away from home. And all individuals, when in public areas, should maximize their physical distance from others and avoid social settings where appropriate physical distancing is not practical, unless precautionary measures are observed and CDC guidelines are followed. So I think this kind of goes hand in hand with, what we've talked about earlier in this presentation, that although things are loosening up in Arizona and, we're getting back to a new normal, I guess we could say, we still need to be mindful that the Stay Healthy, Return Smarter, Return Stronger order is in place, and it is encouraging, social distancing. And to that end, I think we can all agree that having a meeting with a large number of attendees is not something that we're really able to do yet. And that's, why we've been encouraging the virtual meetings. Also, this new order requires HOAs and condos to develop, establish, and implement policies based upon guidance from the Center for Disease Control, the Department of Labor, OSHA, Arizona Department of Health Services, to really limit and mitigate the spread of the COVID-19 virus. And some of these policies, would include promoting healthy hygiene practices, intensifying our cleaning, disinfection, and ventilation practices, monitoring people for sickness, such as taking their temperatures, ensuring social distancing, providing necessary protective equipment for maybe our employees or independent contractors who are entering our communities, and where possible, work in phases, and limiting the congregation of groups of no more than 10 persons when feasible and in relation to the size of the location. Kind of an interesting thing that occurred about 2 weeks ago is that the Arizona Department of Health Services released written guidance which allows for the reopening of pools and gyms and fitness providers with physical distancing and enhanced sanitation requirements. And you can obtain a copy of these guidelines at the following web links, which we are providing to you on the screen right now. And pools have a separate written guidance from the Arizona Department of Health Services, and then gyms and fitness providers have a separate guidance. And you can just use these as a tool, and you should definitely be reading these if you have pools or if you have a gym in your community. Because they give recommendations, and guidelines by the state of Arizona as to how you should consider reopening these amenities in your community. Okay, we're going to switch gears now and talk about our newest cheat sheet, which is Associations and COVID-19, a plan for reopening of HOA and condo common areas. And as I said earlier in this presentation, this is pinned in the comments section. You can also find this cheat sheet, our virtual board meetings cheat sheet, and all of our other cheat sheets. We have about 50 now on various different topics, also on our webpage, which is www.mulcahylawfirm.com. Okay, so let's get into how do we reopen the common areas now that some of these restrictions that have been placed by our state government and federal government are starting to be lifted. And so I'd like to just start out by saying that this is not an easy task. And I said at the beginning, I also serve on my board. I'm on a master association board and a sub-association board. And we're, struggling, negotiating this issue right now, even in my community. And, we're struggling because half of the people want our association to remain closed. They don't want the pools to open. They don't want the tennis court to open. They don't want the gyms to open. And then the other half of the community wants the gyms, pools, tennis courts open yesterday, and they're furious. Why can't these be opened? And so the board is really walking on a tightrope here because, of course, we're elected by the owners, and we want to make sure that we're acting in a manner that is, that our community, wants us to act. But this topic is really divisive, and people feel differently about this. So the board is struggling right now. I'm sure your board probably is struggling with, how do we reopen these amenities safely and in a way that isn't going to create liability for our associations? And it's a tough call. I'm not lying to you. These are very difficult situations. And let's face it, we don't have a roadmap. This is the first pandemic that most of us have ever lived through. And, regulations are changing every day, sometimes weekly, sometimes daily. And, wo're all just trying to navigate through this and make the best decisions we possibly can for our associations. And so what would like to do today in this second half of the presentation is just to give you our recommendations. So for the past 2 or 3 weeks, our firm has helped hundreds of associations through this process. And so I'd like to give you kind of like a map as to how you can effectively reopen your common areas or not reopen them if that's your choice. And how can you do it in a way that is safe for your residents and also in a way that limits the liability for your association. So I'd like to just start out by saying it's hard for me to give a one-size-fits-all recommendation on reopening your common elements. Why is that? Because every association is different. I mean, some people say that there's over 10,000 associations in Arizona. There are large associations, there are small associations, there are some associations that are like a little city, some associations that are smaller, and they don't have all the amenities that, other associations have. So it's hard for me to create a bright line rule on this, but what I've done through this cheat sheet and through this presentation is I've navigated it in such a way that this will apply to every association as you're making your decisions. And I didn't leave any stones unturned. And I really tried to think through every possible problem to give you the best advice and to let you think about these issues before you make final decisions for your community. So let's start out with, I have 4 general recommendations, and then we're going to kind of get into, an overview of the nitty gritty on opening pools and tennis courts and gyms. But my 4 general recommendations for reopening the common areas, the first one, and frankly, it's probably one of the most important ones, is communicating. This is a time that you have to communicate with your residents. Pressure is going to be mounting on the board to reopen or to not reopen your common areas. And if you don't tell your owners what's going on, the gossip mill is going to go nuts at your association. And so you need to be communicating as often as is necessary to make sure that you're answering people's questions, hopefully before they even have them. And so now more than ever is the time to stay in touch with your residents, listen to their thoughts on reopening or not reopening common areas, and letting them know what the board is doing in real time on these important issues. It's my opinion that the board needs to be flexible and should encourage residents to be flexible too as things change. It'll be important also for the board to continuously provide communication to the residents with updates as they occur. Now, some of the larger master plan communities in Arizona, they're phasing their reopenings. And so, they're slowly reopening their communities. They're not just opening everything up at once. And that's totally fine. That is an approach that many associations are taking, typically the larger ones. Now, the smaller and the medium-sized associations, they may be taking a different approach. And if you're one of those associations that is phasing the reopening, just make sure you're staying in communication with your owners as each phase starts, and letting them know, what the plan is for the reopening and what any new rules may be for the reopening. The second piece of advice or recommendation that I would like to give you for reopening your common areas is make sure you're talking and consulting with your trusted advisors. Your trusted advisors would be like your management company, your manager, your association's attorney, your insurance agent for your association. These are all key people in your inner circle who are here to help you. And so, for example, talking with your management company about, what do you suggest for the reopening, or is your company implementing any policies? Making sure that any policies that your board ultimately decides regarding the reopening of the common areas, making sure that you're running that by your legal counsel, especially any signage that you're posting, on your common areas regarding your cleaning practices or entering at your own risk. All of these things really should be run by both your management company and your attorney. And lastly, your insurance agent. This would be a really great time to reach out to your insurance agent and ask some questions. Some questions that I think are important questions to be asked are, what insurance coverage do we have on issues that potentially could present themselves as a result of this pandemic? If an owner claims that they, contracted COVID-19 from, using our pool or being in our gym, is that something that our insurance policy would cover? I'm going to tell you right now, I think 99% of you, maybe more, your insurance agent is going to say there's an exclusion for viruses in your insurance policy, and that will not be covered. And I'm hearing that a lot from insurance agents and also from associations who are reaching out to their insurance agents. So I think you need to expect that is probably going to be the answer. But I think on the flip side of that, to balance it out, as an attorney that practices in this area, it is my opinion that it will be very difficult for owners to be able to prove that they contracted the virus in any one place, and that the association's gym was the cause of them, getting the virus or whatever. And so, although there very likely is no insurance coverage if somebody should sue an association, the flip side of that is that it'll be very difficult to prove that, the association's action or inaction, caused an owner or a resident to, contract the COVID-19 virus. One other thing I just want to mention, just kind of related to that, is many states are now passing legislation that limits a business's liability, or, provides no liability if an owner, tries to sue that business for contracting COVID-19 virus. And we've seen at least 3 states right now, maybe a few more last week that I may have missed, but at least 3 states right now have legislation that has become law in that state. And last week, Arizona's legislature, the Senate reconvened briefly last week, and a bill was introduced that discusses that. The House did not act on it when they were, briefly in session for a few minutes last week. But it's expected that our legislature, even though it's closed right now, it's expected that they're coming back to work this summer. And that may be a bill that passes. And if that passes, that would be extremely beneficial to associations in limiting our liability in the event that, any owners should sue us for allegedly, obtaining COVID-19 from our common areas. One other recommendation is, talk about, does our association want to, use an owner release of liability form, or just a general release of liability form? Is this something that our association, wants to implement to mandate that any owner who uses our common areas has to sign this? And basically the owner would be, signing a release saying that they release the association from any liability for any claims regarding COVID-19. I would say that maybe 25% of our clients are using a owner release form or are requiring their owners to sign it or their residents to sign it before they're able to use the common areas again. But probably 75% are saying, it's just not something that we, can implement because our association just isn't set up that way. The ones that are doing it are typically the ones that have like a fob for people to get in and out of common areas, and their fob is deactivated until they sign the release. But many associations don't have the finances to have that type of a system in place, and so trying to track people down and getting them to sign this release of liability form is just not possible for many associations. And frankly, the release of liability form may not even be something that holds up in court. I think the greatest benefit of it would be that owners would think twice if they sign it about suing the association. And again, I'm not even sure that a court would uphold an association's release that an owner has signed, releasing the association from any liability. The last general piece of advice is we got to be flexible. Right now, things are changing quickly, and so we need to reevaluate policies when necessary. And the suggestions in this cheat sheet that we're going to be talking about in a minute, they're for the initial reopening of associations. And they may need to be reevaluated as governmental orders change and restrictions are tightened or lifted. You may also need to reevaluate it after hearing input from your owners. Maybe your owners are furious, that the tennis courts aren't open longer each day. I know just in my association where I said I'm on the board, there are owners that have actually started a petition saying that they want to have longer tennis hours. And kind of in our association, where I'm on the board, we phase the opening of certain amenities. And phase 1 was to only have the tennis courts open 4 hours a day. And now residents want them open 8 hours a day. And our board is relaxing the restrictions, starting tomorrow, based upon the feedback that we've received from owners. So, that's normal. Just know that that's part of our job, is having a little bit of a thicker skin and, make sure that we're listening to the owners and providing a response back. And reevaluating our policies, because flexibility is really important right now. And as long as we can safely expand the tennis hours, for example, if enough owners want that, that's something that, it's time. It's time for us to have a longer period for us to have the tennis courts open. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the nitty-gritty on the cheat sheets. So this cheat sheet is a wonderful resource for associations that are right now, reopening their amenities. And basically what I did is we took all the different amenities. So pools, gyms, fitness centers, tennis, pickleball, shuffleboard, bocce ball, horseshoes, clubhouses. Every association's different. So you're gonna all have different amenities. But what we did is we provided you with some recommendations for the signage, which will be, listed at the entrance of these areas. And so the cheat sheet breaks down each one of these different areas, and we give you some recommendations on what sort of signage you can post. And then also we give you a checklist of what are some other considerations that you should be considering as you reopen those amenities. And so this is a really great resource because it gives you any possible thing that you should be considering as you're reopening these amenities. And so we hope that as you're going through this process that you will use it as a checklist and come up with what you think is the best plan for your association for signage, sanitation, hours. There's different things for each area. And if you have any questions, don't forget you can always contact our firm. If you want to call us on the free Friday, the first free Friday of the month, which will be this Friday, and ask us, if you have any questions after looking through this cheat sheet, we're here to help you. And, just in conclusion, remember that each amenity is different. I have a number of associations that, have reopened their, pools and the tennis, but because of the nature of the gym, even though the governor has said, the gyms can be reopened and, the state of Arizona has given us some guidelines on this, they're saying we aren't set up to, clean these machines as frequently as they need to be cleaned, in order to have the gym operate. And so we're going to push off reopening the gym for a month or whatever and see, how things continue to loosen up and see if we can maybe come up with a better plan to clean these areas. So we hope this new cheat sheet is helpful to you as you reopen your common areas. Okay, looks like we have a few minutes left. And as I said at the beginning of this, discussion today, make sure that you're asking questions, throughout the presentation and, even now as we're kind of entering the last leg. And our entire Mulcahy Law Firm team is available right now, and we're going to be responding to each one of those comments that you make, whether it's a question or a comment. And we'll be trying to give you the best answer that we can based upon the information that you provide to us. So keep those questions coming, and we're just going to hit response, and our team of lawyers with our firm will be responding to those as we go. Now, prior to today, we received a number of questions from people who RSVP'd, and since we have a little bit of time here, I thought I would go through some of those in person. So the first question is, we have a resident with COVID-19. What should our association do? Well, first, I'm very sorry to hear that. Our firm has had several associations contact us, letting us know that either an owner has passed away from COVID-19 or an owner has, been hospitalized and has now returned home. And there are questions about how should we handle this? The rumor mill is rampant at associations, and all the situations that I had was contacted on, that was the situation. People are talking about this, and people are concerned. And so there's two approaches that you can, do on this. The first approach would be that the association doesn't get involved and doesn't put anything out there on this. The second approach is more proactive. The association, in this case, the association had my firm contact the owners or the deceased owner's relative and asked, for clarification as to whether or not they did in fact have COVID-19 or that the person did in fact pass away. And, I made each one of those calls myself, and I can tell you that the people were willing to, provide us with information and were very nice. And, we're concerned about their neighbors. And so we assured them that we were not going to use their name, but that we were going to put a communication out to our residents, just letting them know that, yes, it is true. We did have a resident or, residents that have contracted COVID-19, and then, explaining that these people are in quarantine and, that we're not going to be providing their name now. We're not going to be providing their name ever. And the association is taking whatever precautions we are taking. We list that in the letter. And it's just a form letter that our firm has created and we've had to use over the past few months. So there's really two ways to look at this. There's no right answer for your association. One answer would be don't get involved, don't say anything about it, don't comment on it. The other option is to contact the owner or the resident or the relatives, get confirmation, let them know what we're doing. In each one of the cases, our firm, after we talked with them, we sent them either a note or we sent them a plant or flowers just saying, we hope you feel better, or we're so sorry for your loss on behalf of the association. And, then we put out a brief communication to the owners, just letting them know, that there was a case and that this person is in quarantine and taking all precautions and what the association may be doing in terms of extra sanitizing in the common areas, etc. And honestly, in all the cases that we did that, it worked out really well. People were happy to have the information. They didn't demand to know who had it or any more information about that owner, and people just were generally really well behaved on the entire situation. So I was happy to see that. Okay, does an association have a responsibility to check in on elderly residents during this pandemic time? So do you have a legal obligation or a responsibility? No. There's one association in the West Valley in Arizona that is just knocking it out of the park, doing a great job on communicating. I hope they don't mind me saying this, but I'm on their mailing list for Westbrook Village, and they are just constantly in communication with their owners regarding checking in on each other and the reopening and the soft reopening of this, and the new changes that they're implementing. And they're just doing a really great job on communicating with owners. And so I do think it's a nice thing to encourage us to be neighborly and check in with our neighbors. But the association doesn't have a legal responsibility to do that. What is your opinion regarding community inspections for violations during the pandemic? Should we stop violation letters or fines to our owners? That's a great question. So remember that, even though we're in a pandemic, people still do need to pay assessments, and they still do need to maintain their properties. That being said, I really don't want to see a lot of associations in Arizona being super nitpicky about violations. And, I think what we should be encouraging, management companies or board members that may be handling violations for associations to just be nice in our communication with the owners, and, to remind them of their responsibilities. I don't think this is the time to be racking up a ton of fines, against owners for violations. But it's also not the time just to let everything go and have your association, go down the drain. So I think there's a balance here. And I think that, you should continue with, sending violations for, violations that are, larger type violations. Stay away from the nitpicky ones, like your hose isn't in a hose container in the front yard, or you had 2 weeds in your front yard. Because let's face it, people are on edge right now in the pandemic. It's a hard time for everybody. And so if somebody receives a nitpicky letter from their association, it's going to upset them because they're already feeling not restful, during this time. And so, let's be really mindful. Let's go back to some of the things we talked about at the beginning of this session about being nice, being considerate of others, being compassionate during this time. Let's remember that as we're running our associations. Okay, another good question here is, should we have board meetings and annual meetings, but just social distance? I've had this question so much this week. I'm so glad somebody asked that. So some associations are saying, our clubhouse is now reopened and we can separate people. We can get our, measuring sticks out and separate people 6 feet, and we can get 30 people in there. And, we can social distance, but I think we got to go back to what the governor's order says, the new order, and they're encouraging social distancing. They are not encouraging groups of, more than 10. And let's face it, meetings are a social event, and people talk before, they talk afterwards. We really are still recommending, at least through the summer, to, have your meetings via teleconference or have them by conference call, and not meet in person right now, just for the health and safety of your residents. And also just because having these meetings virtually by, Zoom teleconference or conference call, it's working. A lot of associations are really effectively running their business this way. And if you'll give it a chance, it might be something that could be really beneficial to your association going forward. You might get board members that might not have been ever able to serve on the board because, maybe in the summertime they go back to Wisconsin or Michigan. And, you might be able to have board members from Canada, So it might really be long-term a good thing for your association to have this ability. And now is the perfect time, when we're in these kind of uncertain times, to be utilizing it. So I would still say, I would be opposed to having in-person meetings, at least through the summer. Even if you can social distance, the seats, I still think that at this point, you should be doing the virtual board meetings. Next question is, restaurants are open in Arizona. Why can't we have board meetings and annual meetings, but just social distance? Again, this is kind of the same question. I know it's confusing because, the reopening of Arizona is now allowing, people to go to restaurants with just their family. And, as long as the tables are adequately separated. But we still think that the nature of a board meeting is such that people are going to want to congregate before and after, and it's just not a good idea. Can we use email for emergency board meetings during the coronavirus pandemic? So yes, I would say probably almost all of my associations right now have been, making some decisions, if they are truly emergencies, by using email. And, of course, in non-pandemic times, I'm, always reminding boards to be mindful of the Arizona open meeting law, and that anytime a quorum of the board is present discussing association business, it needs to be an open board meeting. But let's face it, this has been a really difficult time. And, we have had to make decisions quickly sometimes as a board. And there have been boards that, in an emergency circumstance over the past 10 weeks, they've made decisions by email. And that's fine. I have been okay with that. But we need to make sure that we are using it appropriately going forward and sparingly. And so if you did make any decisions over the past 10 weeks as a board via email, make sure that at your next board meeting that you are reading into the record the minutes of that emergency board meeting, so that it's, placed in the official records of the association. And, that'll be very important, so that it's now, legal and pursuant to what the Arizona statute says. And then use those emails, emergency email votes, really sparingly in the future, and only when you can't wait 48 hours to notice the meeting to actually have a meeting. Okay, the last question we're going to take is, does your HOA or condo have liability if the association doesn't follow the Center for Disease Control guidelines for cleaning common areas, and someone sues as a result of death or serious illness? So great question. So, can we be liable if we don't clean exactly to CDC guidelines and then someone dies of COVID-19? Anything is possible. People can be sued for anything, but, I don't think any association has specific training on cleaning to CDC guidelines. I have been receiving an enormous amount of emails from cleaning companies that have popped up as a result of the COVID-19 virus, stating that they do clean per CDC standards. But, most of our clients don't have a budget to hire a company like that to come in and clean from head to toe every day the common areas that are used frequently by your owners. So do we have liability? Possibly. But again, we kind of have to go back to, they're going to have to prove causation. They're going to have to prove whoever is injured or claims that they had, COVID-19 because of, the association allegedly not cleaning to CDC standards. They're going to have to prove that. And I think that's going to be very difficult to do. Okay, so as we're kind of rounding out the end of our, first virtual HOA Academy, I would just like to thank everybody today for listening in. We have a really great virtual HOA Academy planned for next week, a week from today, same time. And we're going to be talking about the financial impact of the COVID-19, virus, and how that's going to impact associations for the rest of 2020 and 2021. Some of the things that we're seeing already is that there's been an increase of owners that aren't paying assessments, or they're contacting the association and just are saying, hey, we lost our job. We want to pay the assessments, but for the first time in the entire time I've been an owner of the association, I can't pay. And we're going to talk about what's the best way to approach that. And we're going to talk about how we can communicate with our owners the importance of paying assessments. We're going to talk about what are some things that boards can do to help owners get through this difficult time, and what are some, things that boards can do as they plan their budget for 2021. Now, most of our clients typically plan their budgets for the next fiscal year, which will start January 1st, 2021 for many of you. We're going to go through step by step what are some things that you need to think about. And just to give you a little hint about what we're going to be talking about, I think we all need to anticipate that there's going to be at least a 10 or 15% delinquency in your association in 2021. And we can talk about how we can add that into your budget and make good decisions so that we have enough money to operate in 2021 in your associations. Again, I'd like to thank the neighborhood services departments from all around the state of Arizona for coming together and allowing us to provide this virtual HOA Academy today. It's been our pleasure working with all of you, and it's great to see how much you care about all of your residents and want them to have the most up-to-date information for HOAs and condos in Arizona so that they can make good decisions for their communities. Also, I want to remind you to not forget to take advantage of our firm's First Friday free call-in, which will be this Friday, June 5th, from 9 a.m. until 10 a.m. The procedure is that you need to call between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. and our firm will provide you with a response call. We try to do it every time before lunch, but sometimes we have a high volume of calls. So recognize that no matter what, an attorney from our firm will call you back before the business day ends on Friday, June 5th. So make sure you give us a number that we can reach you at any time on Friday if you call in. And then lastly, we just want to remind you of some resources that are available to help homeowners and board members and managers as you manage your communities. Our webpage at mulcahylawfirm.com has a wealth of free information for all of you, and we encourage you to check it out. We have over 50 cheat sheets on many different topics that pertain to running associations and are really well received. A lot of people download them and keep them as a resource, but they're always available on our website, and all you have to do is click the cheat sheet tab on our homepage. And we also have over 60 videos now regarding different topics pertaining to Arizona Community Association law. And we've had over 20,000 views of our videos since we started doing this about a year ago. And a lot of great information too on COVID-19 issues. We've had 5 different Facebook Live seminars, and all of those are on there. And so we encourage you to check out our webpage to help you obtain more information so that you can make your communities better. So we look forward to seeing you next week, a week from today, as we tune in and talk about the financial impact of COVID-19 and creating a budget for 2021 for your associations. We wish you all the best and stay safe and healthy in these difficult times. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Take care, everybody. Bye.
This is Bruce Wall from the City of Scottsdale's Neighborhood College Program. We're all in this together.
The City of Peoria. We're in this together.
The City of Chandler, we're in this together.
Town of Queen Creek, we're in this together.
Hi, this is Jamie from the City of Scottsdale with my daughter Jocelyn. Whether you're working from home or doing kindergarten from home, we want to remind you that we're in this together.
City of Tempe. We are in this together.